everyone. Welcome to Medicine and Miracles. I'm your host, Dr. Scott McMahon. I've been a board certified pediatrician for over 30 years, and I've specialized in the diagnosis and treatment of CIRS for over 15 years. CIRS is short for Chronic Inflammatory Response Syndrome. It's a mystery illness to many doctors, but it can affect any part of your body. And not only have I been a doctor, I have evaluated over 2,000 patients. I've published 10 medical journal articles. I've co-written a CIRS medical textbook. I've given over 50 presentations at different medical meetings, and I've testified as an expert in 10 different states and 2 other countries. But I'm also a man of faith, and I've followed Jesus for over 30 years. I'm an ordained minister. I've pastored a church. I've written a book on spiritual warfare, and I've been overseas 15, 16 times on different kinds of mission trips. So this is Medicine and Miracles, and we're going to talk about medicine and science, but we're also going to talk about faith and miracles. Some people think that medicine and faith are not compatible subjects, but I'm going to show you that that thinking is not correct. Medicine, miracles. Medicine and miracles. It's going to be great. So let's dive in. Today, we're going to look at CIRS treatment, and specifically, we're going to look about how to go about moving if that's what you need to do. Now, this is a continuation of the series on CIRS, and we've been explaining CIRS in episodes 3 and 4 and 8 and 9 and 11 and 14, and also episode 15. And recently, we've been looking at the Shoemaker protocol. This is the treatment protocol for CIRS. And in episode 14, we talked about binders and different ways of binding, which is step 2 of the protocol. In our last episode, episode 15, we talked about remediation, which is one way to accomplish step 1. Now, remember, there are 2 ways to accomplish step 1. One is to remediate, or to get the mold out of your house. The other is just to move. And sometimes you just can't remediate. So, for instance, some people are renting or leasing, and they just don't have the freedom to do remediation, or maybe they don't want to spend $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 to remediate something that they don't actually own. So that's a real valid reason to move. Some people are stuck in a contract. They've got a lease arrangement for an entire year, and it's only 3-4 months in. How do you get out of that? Well, usually a letter from your doctor saying that for medical reasons that you need to leave, that's usually sufficient. On occasion, you may have to get a letter from an attorney saying, hey, let my client out of their lease, give them their cleaning deposit back and things like that, so that you can go to another place. Condo owners, condominiums, may have other limitations based on their HOA or their homeowners agreement that they have, or homeowners association. So you got to follow the rules, but remember, a doctor's letter or a lawyer's letter may be enough to be able to help get you out of your lease. Now, I'm going to say another thing. If you are planning a lawsuit, and I'm not suggesting that you sue, but some people are thinking about suing their property management association or their landlord. If you're going to go that route, make sure that you get professional commercial testing of your place before you move out, and also take lots of pictures of the water damage or the visible mold or other things that would support your case that there is a water problem, and write down all your dates and communicate in writing with the people that you have to deal with so that you have a record of what's going on. Now, there are other places that you may have to move out of. For instance, your workplace could be a water damaged building. And sometimes your employer will be able to accommodate you into a different building or a different wing of the building or a different office. Sometimes those things can help. Sometimes they can't. Sometimes you just have to change jobs or work from home. Another issue might be the place that you worship, Or if you go to school, or if it's one of your children and they're going to school, that might be the place. Bottom line is, any place where you spend a lot of time, if it's moldy, it can trigger your CIRS. Now, not everybody has the resources to just move. I mean, that can be an expensive endeavor, particularly if you're moving from your own home that you own. Uh, Most people need to sell that home. And if you're in that situation, keep in mind there's a couple thoughts here. Most states require you to disclose to whoever you're selling it to that there has been a mold problem. Even if you've fixed it, if you've remediated it and you've done testing afterwards that show that it's not a problem, you still need to disclose that to potential buyers. And then last but not least, there's an ethical issue here that even if your state doesn't require you to disclose, know that 1 out of every 4 people that move into your house could potentially have the same CIRS issue. So you really have kind of a moral, ethical obligation to let them know that there's been water damage so that they don't get sick when you leave. Now, the next problem after you get through all of that is you got to find a clean place. And that's not necessarily easy. It can be really hard. And when I say clean, I don't mean that it smells good and, ooh, look, fresh paint and they clean the carpet. I'm talking about, does it have mold in it? Has it had previous water damage? And this can be really a problem if you're living in a hot real estate market. Like I've had patients who were in San Francisco, for instance, and there might be an ad for an apartment to rent, costs $4,000 a month, and there's 10 people trying to get the apartment. And so if you say to the people, well, I'd like to rent this apartment, but can you give me a week so that I can do mold testing in here? That apartment might be gone before you're it just gets swooped up and it's gone before you get your testing back. Can be the same if you're looking at putting a contract on a house in a really hot real estate market. In these sellers markets, you can't wait, and that can make it really, really difficult for you. So it's important to get testing if you can, but sometimes those delays are not tolerable. And to be honest with you, I've known patients that have had to look at 30 or more places before they could find one that they could tolerate and that they could afford, because it can be expensive. If you can build your own place, if you have the resources to do that, that's awesome. You get some land and you build, but there are even some horror stories there. I know one family, I won't give a lot of details, but they got sick in their home. They spent $100,000 to get a kit home. They paid a contractor to put it together. The contractor was fully aware that they had mold problems, and that's why they were leaving their house. The contractor put it together. They didn't ventilate or take the vent tubes from the toilets. They didn't take them up all the way through the attic and through the roof so they would ventilate to the outside, to the air. They ventilated into the attic. And within 3 months, that attic was full of mold and the people were getting sick again in their brand new house. So you got to watch for them. And to make it even worse, they end up suing that builder, and they lost, even though the builder didn't build it correctly. So then they had to live in a little trailer. All like 5 or 6 of them had to live in this itsy bitsy mobile home trailer, but it's the only place that they had where they could stay healthy. So don't do that. If you do build something, make sure you watch what the builder is doing. If you have to hire an additional person to come in and make sure they're doing it right, then do that. In the meantime, you have to survive. And I'm going to tell you some of the things that people have done, that my patients have done to survive while they're trying to find a new place. Some of them will sleep in tents in their backyard, or if they're renting an apartment, they sleep on the balcony at nighttime so they don't have to spend 8 or 10 or 12 hours breathing the air of their apartment and making them sicker. Other people I know have taken their cars, they pulled out the upholstery, or maybe they've got a van and taken out everything that's upholstered so that it's just metal. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm going to get crazier. Some people actually live in their vehicles as opposed to people that sleep in their cars and go into the house to shower and cook. Other people go to the north rim of the Grand Canyon and they camp there for 4 or 5, 6 months out of the year. And there's a whole little colony of people that are out there. You don't see it on Dateline, you don't hear about it on the news, but there are people out there whose homes are making them sick, and that's where they live. Other people go to hotels or Airbnbs if they can find a place that doesn't make them sick while they're looking for a rental place or building a home. It's crazy, but you have to do what you have to do. Now, here's some tips on how you might go about moving and finding a place that works for you. Number one is geography. And you may have heard me talk about this before, but there are certain places, certain geographical destinations that sometimes work better for you than others. So, number one is mountains, 8,000 feet or higher. Some people do very, very well there. Other people do very well at the beach at very low elevation, or so at the beach or within a few blocks of the beach. And still others do well in the high desert areas like New Mexico or Arizona. So you might want to take some time, if you have the resources, and go to each of those places and find out where you feel the best. And of course, that also works like if you have a mobile kind of job, like if you're a computer programmer and you can work from anywhere, then that's a really viable option for you. Once you decide on the geography, and it may be where you're living currently, you should contact a local realtor. And whether you're buying a house or renting, tell them, hey, listen, I need to be in a place that does not have a history of water damage. Generally speaking, newer places would be good. Sometimes brand new places will work for you, but they need to be places that don't have a history of water damage. And for some of you who are chemically sensitive, the off-gassing from a brand new house can be a problem for you. The sheetrock might off-gas for 2 or 3 years. It all depends on the materials that are used in the construction of that. So the sweet spot, if you're chemically sensitive, is not brand new, but maybe 2 or 3 years old so that it's had time to off-gas. And then the last thing I want to say about this, and this is just tragic, but be aware, because homeowners and landlords, sometimes they don't tell you the truth. I guess the word for that is they lie. You can be totally honest with them and tell them that you get sick in water damaged places, or in a home that's previously had water damage. And I have had a number of patients who were told that there's never been any water damage, only to find out from neighbors a couple years later, oh yeah, I remember when they, had flooding and they had to pull this out and do that. It took them a couple months, and they get sick in this home because the homeowner didn't disclose. Even in states where disclosure is mandatory, sometimes they don't disclose. It is not uncommon for landlords, if you're renting, to come if they see a little visible mold, to just clean over it with bleach, even if they're doing it every week because it keeps coming back. It is not uncommon for that. Or to just paint over mold, and either in their mind they think that it's taken care of, or they just don't care about you and they actually lie. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard, so I'm just telling you about that. So another tip is, if you have the availability, is to test. And there are different kinds of tests. I recommend that you use one of the mold DNA tests, like an ERMI, Environmental Relative Moldiness Index, or a HERTSMI-2, HERTSMI-2. Don't ask me to tell you what that stands for. That you do those kind of testing. They take about a week. And so if you have that kind of time, it's good to do that testing to see if there are obvious levels of mold in the place. There's other testing that you can consider doing, like endotoxin testing and actinobacteria testing. You can do all three of those, mold, actinobacteria, and bacteria, through www.envirobiomics.com. It's ENVIROBIOMICS. And you choose either test number 7 or test number 8. If you just want to do the mold DNA testing, the ERMI or HERTS-Me2, you can do EnviroBiomics, or you can do www.mycometrics.com. That's MYCOMETRICS.com. So those are a couple places that you can get testing done relatively inexpensively, relatively fast. But the most sensitive test there is you, because mold testing only looks at maybe 2 or 3 different things when there are 30 different things in a water damaged building that can trigger CIRS. 30. So, I mean, we're looking at other things like volatile organic compounds and actinobacteria and endotoxins and many other things. And your body will test for all of those, but the tests that you send off only test for a few. So try and arrange with a realtor if you can spend 3 or 4 hours, or even overnight, like sleep overnight, even if the place is unfurnished, so that you can spend some quality time there. And in the morning, if you feel pretty good, that's a pretty good sign. But if you feel really crummy, well, that's a sign too that maybe this isn't the place for you. So those are some tips, and I have one more for you. Once you find a good space, once you find a place to go, you got a contract on it, moving day comes, don't just move your possessions from the current place that you're at that's moldy into the new place, because you can cross-contaminate it. Now, some people will tell you got to throw it all away. I don't agree with that. I think there are ways to clean certain articles so you don't have to start from new. And we'll discuss that on another episode. So you can find a lot of free videos about moving and other resources at www.cirsx.com. There's one particular video. It was by Jennifer Schrantz, SCHRANTZ, if you're using the search function on cirsx.com. She's a realtor. She gave a talk in July of 2023 at the annual mold meeting that was being held in Boulder, Colorado, and that addresses this issue directly. You can also find a list of trained professionals who treat CIRS at www.survivingmold.com. There's also a guide, like a renter's guide, how to find a clean place, that's created by Cindy Edwards. She's an indoor environmental professional, and you can find that at survivingmold.com. And if you're looking for direct-to-consumer services, check out www.moldco.com. But for the ultimate learning experience about CIRS and to meet the people that actually treat it or remediate your houses or whatnot, come to the Surviving Mold CIRS-X annual meeting. It's going to be in Tempe, Arizona this year, June 5th to June 8th of 2025. Find out more by going to www.cirsx.com. And if you decide to go, use the coupon DRSCOTT10, Dr. Scott 10, you'll get 10% off. Okay, now finding a clean living space might seem like a miracle, but this podcast serves to remind you that miracles still happen, and they happen every day. So I live in a small city. It's located about 200 miles from eight different metropolitan areas, and there's like nothing in between. Apologies to the small towns that are in between. Fine dining experiences in the place that I live are few and far between, as they might be in most of such isolated locales. So in May of 2024, I had to go to Cincinnati to testify in a mold trial. And I testified in the morning, but my flight home wasn't until the next day. So I decided I didn't really want to do any of the tourism things. I decided I'm just going to have a nice dinner, something I can't get in my hometown. So I found a place online, I made a reservation, and I showed up at around 5 o'clock. But this restaurant was in one of those touristy places where cities have kind of blocked it in. There was no parking actually there. I had to park about 400 yards away in a parking garage and then walk to it. So I did that. It was a nice stroll, took about 5 or 10 minutes, and I was probably about 50, maybe 100 feet from the restaurant, and I'm crossing the last street, and there's another person coming. I don't think he was paying a lot of attention, so I moved over to the right so that we wouldn't run into each other. Now, the street that we were walking on, I was crossing a street, that street was bricked and just made out of bricks, and it had some old railroad tracks that were embedded at street level. So the tracks were flush with the street. But the problem is the tracks have like a gap on the other side of them that is in between it and the next bricks. So the rails were level, but the gap wasn't. And as I slid over, my right foot landed on the rail and slid off it and went into the gap. And as I scooted my foot over and did that, I heard a loud snap in my right ankle. And I instantly felt this pain shooting from there. And I had sprained it badly. And unfortunately, I have considerable personal experience with sprained ankles. I've been on crutches about a dozen times, most of when I was young. But I know what the sound is. I know what it feels like. I know how to treat it. Anyway, these are my first thoughts as soon as it happened. I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to go have this nice dinner, and then I'm going to have to walk 400 yards back to my car, just kind of hobbling. Right? And then in the morning, I have to return my rental car, and I have to walk to the terminal from there. I'm going to have to walk with my carry-on luggage because I usually just travel with carry-on. I have to walk with my carry-on luggage all the way through the airport. Then I'm going to get to Dallas-Fort Worth, which is like the longest walking airport in the nation. I didn't make that up. And I'm going to have to walk through DFW probably about a mile to get to my connection. I'm then going to, when I get home, I'm going to have to walk to my car. If I'm going to get crutches, I'm going to have to go through the emergency room to get crutches overnight. How am I going to do that with my carry-on luggage? I don't want to take a wheelchair through the airports. These are the immediate thoughts that went through my head of how inconvenient it is to sprain my ankle at this time. So I finished walking across the street and I was hobbling and I was limping and I could feel the pain. In fact, I could feel the swelling had already started. And then I had a different thought. And this is one we've talked about over the last 3 or 4 episodes in the miracle section. I had a different thought. And I said to myself, I am a son of the Most High God. I remembered that I am surrounded by the glory of God. And I remembered that every step that I take, there is heaven on earth, right where I am, because I am the temple of the Most High God. That's what it says in the Bible. I'm the temple of the Most High God, and wherever I go, heaven meets earth where I am. And I stopped and I looked down at my ankle and I said those 3 things to it. And I went in and I enjoyed my meal, and it was wonderful. And I told my ankle, you're not allowed to be injured, you're not allowed to swell up, and you're not allowed to have pain. So I had my meal, and when I finished the meal, I reached down to feel my ankle, and that swelling that was already there was completely gone. There was no pain. There was no swelling. I was able to walk back to my car. I was able to, without hobbling, I was able the next day to go through 2 airports with my luggage. There was no pain. There was no swelling. There was no limping. And I didn't give it any treatment at all, no ice or ace bandages or anything, except authoritative prayer and belief. So all the glory about this to God. Wow. Isn't he good? And if he's good for me, he can be good for you. So in every episode of Medicine and Miracles, we try and bring you a moment of hope, an uplifting thought for the day. I'll be honest, when my ankle felt all better, that was pretty uplifting for me at the time. But today we're going to talk about a very special relationship that is available to you if you're someone who follows God, if you're someone who is a son of the Most High God, if you follow Jesus. Now, we know that we can be God's sons and God's daughters. I mean, we've talked about that before. And we know that Abraham was God's friend. And we can be also. We've talked about these things. But did you know that in the Bible, it refers to the collective, the people that follow God and serve him? Did you know that he refers to them as his wife? Now, don't get all weird on me and say, well, how can I be his son and be his wife and all that? I'm going to tell you that's earthly human thinking. We have to take a step back. And so let's take that step back. I'm talking about spiritual thinking. I'm talking about how the spirit realm with God and angels and whatnot existed before the earth did, before the material world. There were relationships before the earth was created in the spirit. And God created family and fatherhood and sonship and marriage and all these things on the earth to help us humans to understand what relationship with him could be like in the spirit realm. Now that's spiritual thinking. So let's take that a step further. God offers an intimacy with him that is unbelievable. And it is to know him in the same way that you are known by him. He will reveal himself. He will be your best friend. He'll talk to you. He'll guide you. There's an intimacy there that supersedes anything else on earth. When his presence is on you, the earthly equivalent is the marriage act that you would have with your spouse, where the two become one. Now, that may sound a little weird, but God's plan is for you to become one with him. Now, not in the new age where I am God and whatnot. No. You're still whoever you are, but God wants to create a oneness with you in the same way that a husband becomes one with his wife. That's the spiritual intimacy that I'm talking about. It's awesome. It's amazing. It gets deeper and deeper. So I only know of it to the degree that I know, but I'm actively trying to allow God to become even more intimate with me. It's not weird. It's what you were created for. And it's in the Bible in John chapter 17. And he's offering that invitation to you right now. And if you want it, all you have to do is say, yes, God, I want that. But then you have to follow his commands. Because when we sin, when we break his commands, we walk away from that intimacy. And that's why he tells us not to sin. It's not because he's a killjoy. It's not because God doesn't want you to have any fun in life. It's because he knows that our sins separate us from the intimacy that we can have with him. And that's the whole thing. Again, this is in John chapter 17. You can read it for yourself. That's why we were created, to become one with him, one with Jesus, and one with Holy Spirit. Well, that's it for today. So thank you again for joining us. And if you liked what you saw, if you learned something new, hit the like and subscribe buttons. And join us again for our next episode of Medicine and Miracles, where we find the mysteries of the human body intersecting with the unsearchable God. Thanks. God bless you and have a great day. This is Dr. Scott McMahon. Goodbye.